Welcome everybody to Space Force Supplemental. We are we we have been doing Space Force for 2 seasons. We took a break for a while after the end of our run through all 12 Star Trek movies. And if you have not tuned in or listened in on those,
no, 13.
Is there 13?
Peter Capaldi's line. Yes, it's 13.
Oh Jesus! See, I can't even keep track. I lost. I got lost somewhere in the middle there.
Star Trek 5 did happen, and it was great.
You totally won me over on that movie by now, by the way. But anyway, we went through all 13, not 12, 13 Star Trek films. And then we took a break while we waited for more Star Trek to come, specifically the second season or the third season of Discovery, which is slated for September 18? Something like that.
I thought it was October.
It's September. And we knew that Lower Decks was coming out, but we were like, it's a half an hour cartoon show. It's probably not going to be that big of a deal, and we may hate it. So let's put that aside. But it's kind of good. Like Lower Decks is kind of good. So there's also, and a bunch of other stuff coming up has come out lately. We've got RPG news. We've got some. I want to do a bit of a flashback to the short Trek stuff. Dale Russell is here. Thanks, Dale. Welcome to you as well. Welcome back to Space Force. All right, so let's start with Aid. Aid, you have been doing writing for Star Trek Adventures. You wrote the stats for all of the canonical crew of the Next Generation, I think.
That's what I did. Yes.
Did you get a chance to write like the Kirk era too, or the?
No, they were handed out to various people. Originally, when they were suggesting who wanted to write what, it was almost like a big grab bag that you would like. Okay, I'm going to write Bones, Data, and Geordie, and then someone from it. But then they decided to give everybody a set era. So
I think that's smart as a developer. That because you want to, they all need to interlock with each other. They all need to be, and they need to be written in the same tone. And yes, and also let's be honest. Like any of these characters could be written up 6 different ways, right? Like we could write up Picard 6 different ways, especially if you decide what era you wanted to look at. But so it's best if one person gives their take on all of the cast.
Yeah, and I think they originally were planning on literally just doing the PDFs of the characters, but then when they started doing like introduction text, that was also kind of tied into the actual write-ups of the characters, then obviously it made more sense for one person to do everything. Otherwise, it got to be like, okay, well, that doesn't match up with what I've got, so yeah.
But now you've got a new project. You got to do the bad guys.
Yes, I did. A while ago.
Go ahead.
Yeah, a good while ago. It was because of the miniatures. They've got a box set of the miniatures, and these are the guys for the miniatures. So it's like, hey, we need stats for these guys as well. So it's like, yep, okay, I'd like to do them if possible. And they said yes, which I was quite surprised about. So yeah.
Who's our roster?
Okay, so we have from the I'll click for the PDF. We have a Gorn captain.
Okay.
From the original era.
Yeah.
We have Khan, of course, from, well, technically speaking, from the Star Trek 2 era.
Okay.
General Chang from Star Trek 6. Q from whatever era you want to put it from.
Who was that?
Q.
Oh, Q. Yeah.
Yes, okay, we have stats for Q. Funny enough.
I mean, Q shows up in Deep Space Nine just enough to get punched.
Yes.
Right? But he's really a next gen guy, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And the Q that shows up in Voyager is drastically different from the Q that shows up in TNG.
That's an interesting conversation. We should have a Q conversation one day. We should have a Q&A.
Oh my God.
All right. So Q, the Gorn captain, Chang, Khan.
Yep. Locutus.
Locutus. Oh,
yes.
Nice.
We have Law next. Then we have Gold Cat. And then we have Borg Queen.
The Borg Queen. Okay.
So this time I did actually get to write for multiple series over different eras, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, so I'm very interested in how you did Locutus when you had also written Picard.
Yeah, that was the thing because I did have Picard in mind. Obviously, there's stats in the core book for the Borg. Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously you start off there. You get some that gives us some idea. There's even like a little breakdown there, basically what increases, what doesn't increase, that kind of stuff as well.
Sure.
So you start with there. You start with Picard base, then you add a lovely overlay of Borg technology on top of it, and that gives you base stats.
Yeah.
But with the Star Trek role playing games, it is because their values they have, which are kind of like your things you can tag in the actual skills, that kind of stuff as well. They change all the while. So each one of these, as with the Next Generation crew, is a snapshot of the character at that point in time. Yeah. So they might forget stuff. They might it might not be as important to them as it was originally, and they move on. Obviously, with the Calypso Borg, we are literally looking at pretty much two episodes of him then, and pretty much then because it's Borg, it's purely Borg focused. Everything is Borg focused.
Yeah, yeah.
So the values for Locutus we have on here is Earth must fall to the Borg, a lifetime experience of a Starfleet captain trapped inside the machine, and we are the Borg. Resistance is futile.
So for those that are not familiar with the game system, there's a couple of other games. There are many other game systems that do this, but like your character is partly mechanical. Part of it's defined by numbers. You've got, a command of 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But then another part of it is these values you're describing, which are narrative phrases that characters can tag. Can the GM tag your value, or is it only the player?
As far as I know, it's only the player. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. But I know obviously with the NPCs, it's that they are kind of like tagged as a response to what the players do as well. So they can,
So if this allows the Locutus character to tag both his Borg side, because he's part machine and part of the Borg, but he can also tag his years of experience as a Federation captain to anticipate player character strategies, for example.
Yeah, and a lot of those things kind of increase threat, which obviously allows for additional dice to be rolled, that kind of stuff as well. I mean, the Borg Queen is one of the particular examples, unless I'm mistaken, and they didn't alter anything from what my original writer was there. Sure. Now, so the Borg Queen, she did have a power that effectively meant that she could call on additional Borg, and it would increase the threat level straight away. And that was kind of like a mechanical, actual application of her. Yeah. Just kind of snapping her fingers and some drones fall into line.
Yeah.
So there's always a drone behind the Borg Queen when she needs one. So
did change
questioning?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
Are these mechanics written in such a way that if I wanted to play Locutus or Borg, I can pick up this sheet and be like, okay, here's my character sheet? Or is it set up like in Starfinder where there's clearly a difference between player characters and the monster characters?
No, technically speaking, I think you probably could. There is obviously the control, the attributes and the disciplines there are set to the same standards as we have for player characters. I know when I did data was a problem because obviously everything with data was like, well, he's got a 12 and everything. Because he's looking at everything. You go, well, wait a minute, maybe not. Okay, then you have to kind of take it down. And I think we had effectively a number of points to build him with, and I think he was slightly over by a few that you would normally get as a PC. But obviously that is due to years of experience, that kind of stuff as well. So that came in that respect. But glancing over the Locutus now, it would appear that he has his focuses, which is Hive administration, human culture, leadership, starship protocol, starship captains, starship tactics, and there's nothing really that seems to leap out that would cause a massive problem if you wanted to play, Locutus as a character.
Did you make them with the same points budget that you would have made a PC?
Yeah, there is pretty much within that kind of experience. Okay. Yeah, we're not going obviously Q's being the exception, but we haven't gone like a D&D character where everyone's first level and these are like CR20 characters. They're pretty tied to the same kind of thing. As we've seen in Picard, if you technically wanted to play an ex-Borg, that's doable.
Yeah. it's a little bit of a stretch to imagine somebody playing Locutus, but somebody playing lore is not out of the question, right? Like you can imagine it's an adventure where one person is playing data, another person is playing lore, and they're both got the same problem and they're trying to solve it, right, in different ways or whatever.
Now I want to win a game.
Yeah.
like right there, like data versus lore as a one night stand kind of game.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, because lore was quite cool. Lore was is because he is that reflection of data that his stats are very, very similar, but his focuses and his values are slightly off. Sibling rival be one of his values because he's always trying to one up data. So
it's really smart of them to tag you to write this, Aid, because you had done all the next gen characters. And you were able to create their adversaries in that mirror image kind of way that drew on the knowledge you already had writing up their original versions. So that whoever gave you that job was smart to do that.
Yeah, and so the other thing was we got originally when we were asked to do this, because of the core rulebook being mostly Starfleet centric, so a lot of the actual kind of taste pieces kind of in the corners was lots about Starfleet. Originally, we were asked to kind of try and stay away from that, but it was very difficult to try and do that. So what I've used in this one is effectively a not necessarily Starfleet, but a Federation historian that's basically cataloging all these characters, and he's gone around and trying to find all these. So you get quotes from Geordi LaForge speaking about lore. You get who do we get for the Gorn? Admiral Cartwright for the Gorn.
Right.
Joe Quinn from Khan's one, which is the guy from the who from Star Trek 2.
Oh yeah, Joaquin.
Joaquin. Yeah, who may be the son of the original character, apparently from the TV series.
The Yord is the superior intellect guy.
Yes. Martok's talking about Chang. Vash, I got to write talking about Q, which was fantastic.
Oh man, like I can totally go off on the right on like that. Like I am so jealous of that.
Yeah, I know. It's the best thing ever.
Like Vash as a Jilton level talking about Q, like that just writes itself.
Okay, guys, who's Vash?
Vash is the college romance that Q absconds with and takes to the Gamma Quadrant.
Okay, I missed these episodes.
The archaeologist, yes, it's the right. It's Ricer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the Ricer episode. It's
the aliens come from the future to try and get the doohickey, and Vash is there, and there's the romance. And then she meets Q, and Q takes her off, and then she appears in Deep Space Nine with Q, and I think that's the last time we see Vash.
That's wild. So Vash,
the top Suman, if I remember the MacGuffin, the doohickey is the top Suman.
That's the one.
A crystal thing inside of like a polyester.
So Q steals Picard's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Effectively, yes.
That is wild ass shit.
And that's why Cisco punches him, right? Like that's the
So that's again. So this is the thing, because that was what I was trying to do, trying to draw from all these other characters that aren't technically Starfleet, but they are still within the kind of that Federation thing. So with next one we've got Riker talking about Locutus. We have Geordi LaForge talking about lore. Garak talking about Goldie Cat.
Oh yeah,
and a unknown voice recording of an alien race that's been subjected to Borg domination. So so it's all pretty cool.
So how can people get this? Where is it?
It's on Drive for RPG.
Oh, nice.
It's about $5, I believe. It was the #1 best-selling $5 book on there for a couple of weeks, which is particularly bizarre. How the hell I managed to even get anything involved with anything like that.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, that was really cool.
If only you got royalties.
Yeah. Because then it'd be like, hey, this is great. But yeah, no, I just love it.
Yeah.
So it's
we have to pay a lot more to get royalties in $5.
Yeah. But I just love writing for the system. It's such a good system, and the stuff they're putting out is really well developed and researched, and it's just the quality of it is just so nice. So
there's clearly a lot of love going into those products.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to Lower Decks, because there's 3 whole episodes of that, I wanted to flash back a little bit to Calypso. this is one of the original short treks. Short treks started to come out between the first and second episodes of Discovery. I'm sorry?
First and second seasons. You said
that's what I meant. Yeah. Thank you. First, second seasons of Discovery as a way for this was CBS trying to keep it from canceling the show, from canceling the service, right? Because they knew that when the last episode of Discovery's first season came out, everybody canceled, and most of us all wrote the same thing in the note. It was like, I came here for Star Trek. Bye. See you next year. And so they realized they had to become the Star Trek 365 days a year channel, or at least 52 weeks out of the year. And they started these short treks to sort of bite us over. And I didn't really pay a lot of attention to them at first. I didn't watch them. But for me, as usual for me, it all comes back to Ars Magica. So I'm running this Ars Magica game that's set on Malta. And for those who might know, Malta is the traditional home of Calypso. There's a cave complex on Malta, which is believed to be, or said to be, because this is a myth, let's be honest, said to be the place where Calypso lived. And so as I was researching Calypso's cave, I remembered that there was this Calypso episode. And so I went back and I watched it. And it's so good. Like it was surprisingly good. And so the premise, Jim, you want to set up the episode for us?
Sure. I'd love to. So it's written by Michael Chabon, the showrunner of Picard, and it was the thing that told me, okay, I can set my phasal to stun. I don't have to have it an overload because going to Picard is like as you've seen from the previous season, like Picard's an important character to me. So you bring him out, like I need to know that he's going to be written well. Yeah. And so essentially it's set in 1,000 years in the future from Discovery. Discovery was set originally in the 10 years before Kirk's time, so we're talking 23rd century. Yep. So presumably we'll nail the 300 and like the 33rd century.
I have to say that we don't actually know that.
Yes, I was about to say that as well.
Because Discovery has been catapulted forward in time, and if it never gets to go back, this could be 1,000 years from then.
Yes,
it could be. That's
true.
It
just says 1,000 years from a last contact with the crew. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. So that's conjecture on my part. Good call on that. So essentially, what it is we open up with a man who says his name is Cole, and it's actually like people call him Kraft, and they make a lot of hay of that in the episode of him being crafty, which is starting to like allude to him as Odysseus, Ulysses. Yeah. And we get a character who's wounded, and he's wounded physically, like he's near death, and the ship puts him back together. And he's wounded spiritually, and he's wounded emotionally. He's fought 10 years, and he doesn't know the outcome of that war. He doesn't know the point it is. And this computer, Zora, shows him kindness. And I have thoughts on Zora. I think Zora is I'll get there in a little bit. And this computer, just by showing him kindness, by talking to him like a human being, and him talking back and reciprocating like a human being, like you're different, but you're still my equal. Like it's one of the most beautiful Star Trek like lessons. Like you are different than me, but we are still we're the same. We have the same sort of values. And the way it's set up is, he lies about his name. And at the very end of the story, it's a romance. They wind up, becoming romantically involved. And he's doing this with the computer. And she says it doesn't mean anything. Like when the big thing happens and they go to kiss and he's like, he remembers his wife and his child at home. Again, more echoes of Penelope and his children back home. Yeah. He moves to leave, and the computer says, "Oh, it doesn't mean anything," and he says, "Lyle." Yeah. And then finally, like the nice thing I think about the episode is like emotionally, Star Trek doesn't do romances very well. We never have. Like it's the one real storyline that Trek has never tackled with any sort of sense of permanence. We've had some successful romances, but it really is the thing lacking in Trek. And this, in 18 minutes, gives you a beginning, conflict, resolution, and an ending to a romance in that whole 18 minutes. It's beautifully done.
Yeah. The first best thing about it is Aldous Hodge, who I know from Leverage, where he plays the hacker on Leverage for 6 or 7 seasons, however long that show went.
I had no idea who it was, but now you've said that, I now know exactly who you mean.
Yeah.
It's like, because again, sorry, Jason, but I say, this guy single-handedly holds the entire episode. I mean, that's the thing. There's no one else in it. So the idea they give one kind of like, okay, this is the episode we're doing. Oh, do I get to meet aliens? No, it's just you. Yeah, it's like it's very well written. Yeah.
Did you watch Leverage, Abe? Do you know?
Occasionally, I've seen the odd one or two, but now you told me who it is. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And so I had gone back to the original source material. I'd gone back to the Odyssey because I wanted to know about Calypso. Like, don't laugh at me. I'm a grad student. This is
I knew for a fact I didn't have to do that. Well, because I thought about it too. Like it crossed my mind. Like, if I'm really going to do this episode, we're going to get the band back together. I should get the Odyssey off my bookshelf. And I'm like, nah, Jason's got me covered.
On the nose, man. On the nose. All right, so I went back and I did the reading, and I wanted to know, like, okay, so what do we actually know about Calypso? And the problem with the Odyssey and Calypso, please forgive my dogs. You do the usual go crazy whenever I talk on the blog, but is that she's almost not in it. Like, the whole story of how Odysseus washes up on shore from a shipwreck and Calypso finds him and takes him in isn't actually in the book. The book starts in Medea Res, in that classic in the middle of the story, with Odysseus at the beginning of book 1 of the Odyssey, already on the island, right? And all that matters is figuring out how we're going to get him off. Many articles say that Odysseus has to leave because he'll fall in love with Calypso, and that's bad or something. Okay, that's not why the gods get him to leave. Like, it's not they want to get him home, and I don't think they really give a shit about Penelope and Telemachus, to be frank with you, But so there's this kind of a big debate, and we go back, we see Penelope, we see Telemachus at home, and then the gods decide to make Calypso release Odysseus because he's kind of an unwilling prisoner. And I want to get to that in a second, but they send Mercury, Hermes, down to give Calypso the bad news. And she has this great speech, actually, which they can't put in the episode. They can't adapt it because it's given to the gods, where she says, "You sons of bitches. Like, you gods, you get to go down there and you get to have sex with anybody you want. You get to have love affairs and seduce mortals. And it's okay for you because you're the gods. But when I try to do it, you kick it over. You make me let him go. And you're a bunch of hypocrites." And of course, she's right, which is the great bit about it. But then she lets him go. And we know almost nothing about what Odysseus actually does. His time on the island for 7 years is just mentioned in like half a sentence. It's not going into it all, except for one thing. We know one thing Odysseus does. He sits outside of the cave by the water, and he just watches the ocean. Well, of course, if you watch the episode Calypso, you know exactly where I'm going with this. They only have 18 minutes, and we get some scenes with him in the galley, like eating, and there's this wonderful bit where they show multiple versions of him in the room, so we can understand that time is passing. But we don't really know how much time. But then the key scene, and you touched on this, Jim, right, is when he's just standing there and he's looking outside into space. He's looking out the window, and Calypso, Zora tries to recreate the atmosphere, the sounds, so that he can feel less homesick. And she creates and Aldous Hodge does such a great job, right? He sort of has to convey what the sound of the ocean is like and what the sound of the birds make, and she copies this and she creates this sound, and he just sort of looks out into the darkness and imagines being home. And man, the students did the reading. Like there's nothing that pleases a professor more than when the students show they did the reading, and you're like, God, that's awesome! I love it. I love that you did that. You're right. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, well, I'm just gonna chime in really quick. The one thing that made this episode for me, and I think it's where you're heading, is that in Odysseus, in the Odyssey, he's unwilling, but he it's the opposite. The computer isn't keeping him trapped. Like the computer doesn't do it to trap him. The computer is actually concerned about his welfare. When she points out, here's the shuttle, it's gonna be a dangerous mission to get home because of the distance, and I can't leave. It's not trapping him. Like if this was a TOS episode, Coke is planted on the Enterprise and the computer is evil and he has to phase out by the end of the episode. Because there was that Calvin chauvinism, right? Like this can't be real love because it's with the computer.
Right.
But this doesn't have that. And that's the genius of it, is all she wants to do is be nice to him for the sake of being nice. And it's the benefit of him healing. And when he acknowledges that at the very end, and she's like, I can't deal with any ironies at this point. It's already too home.
Yeah.
I just think the writing of this episode is just so concise. Like it's so not me. Like it's so to the point.
It is lovely, and I agree with you that they take the Calypso stuff, the Calypso episode, and they homage it, and there's a bunch of homages in here. I mean, with the crafty Ulysses, like like this is an often adjective ascribed to Ulysses throughout the book, and also the fact that his name is unknown, which is another classic Odysseus riff when the Polyphemus the Cyclops asks who he is, and he says, "I am no one. I'm nomad." And then later, at the end,
great line.
At the very end, he shouts his name out, and this proves to be very bad. But here they flip all that stuff. They invert a lot of it. So you're right, Calypso. But so one last thing about Calypso before I skip totally to the episode, but. I even went to a friend of the pod, Jess Nevins, who researcher, publisher, writer of many encyclopedias, encyclopedic knowledge of science fiction and fantasy and horror literature, and also a reference librarian. And this everybody knows, like reference librarians all go to heaven. And so I went to Jess and I said, is there any other myth of Calypso anywhere? Like, does she have any other thing? We know that she's the daughter of Atlas and a sea nymph. That's really it. Like, does she ever actually do anything? And the answer was no. This is it. This one scene in the Odyssey is the only Calypso story. And so we get Zora. And you're absolutely right. They flip a bunch of it so that instead of her keeping him as a prisoner, she's helping him. And let's be honest, though, she's also desperately lonely.
Yeah.
Right? And so is he. And they befriend each other and they begin to fall in love. But because Kraft has a wife and a child, and he knows that he loves his wife and his child, and when he realizes what's happening, he has to break it off. He has to call it off. And what's beautiful about that is because this is the 21st century where falling in love with somebody over the internet is a thing. So this episode brings this whole 21st century technological science fiction commentary to it that you couldn't have done in TOS. You know, like you're saying, like this would have been Captain Kirk phasering the computer. Yeah. But also this whole subtext about how two people who just interact every day constantly over something, over a game or over a project or over a, who knows, at work, and they begin to have feelings for each other, and one of them can't move and the other one is married, right? And they're like, okay, this can't work, and we're going to have to do something about it, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful.
And the nice thing is no one sets out to fall in love.
That's right.
No one. It's a result of constant interaction, because it's the only one to interact with.
It's perfectly natural.
Two people just fall into this situation, and they're like, "Oh no!"
Yeah,
that's the moment when he's about to kiss her, and they flash to his wife, and it's not. They don't flash to the graphic; they flash to his memory of taking that picture. And it's like those little cues like that, where it's not like they could have easily have just shown the picture again, but they didn't. They respected the audience enough to be able to provide another image that was similar to it, but distinct enough to recall, oh no, this is his memory of his wife.
Yeah.
This isn't some photographic simulacrum of the wife.
Yeah.
And I just really, like, I can't say enough good things about Calypso. I think Calypso is what new Trek, and I don't say that as a pejorative like some people will, but like that is sort of like the embodiment of taking these modern day 24th century struggles of interactions over the internet and dramatizing them within the Star Trek milieu and with the Star Trek sort of ethos.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate like Calypso. I know on Picard I was raving about the Eleanor episode and how it's my favorite. Absolute candle, and it's still up there.
Absolutely.
But Calypso is probably a little bit better than that. Just by a hail's breadth.
We've talked a lot about this. Well, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on the show?
Yeah, it was a good episode. It was again. I skipped a lot of these short things because I just thought they were good, inconsequential stuff. Didn't really make much. So when this one was like, "Hey, it's 1,000 years in the future," it's like, well, that doesn't tie to the story, then, does it? It's ridiculous. Why would that have anything to do with it? But now we know what happens to the Discovery at the end of season 2. It's interesting to see where the Zora personality comes from. Is it something to do with all that information that's apparently on board the computer that it was trying to keep from Section 31? Yeah. So there is a lot of stuff going on there. And like we were saying, is Discovery going to be abandoned for 1,000 years? It's just weird. So it's definitely something to look forward to see where season 3 actually goes with this. But again, this is something that they tagged on to the end of series 1. This is not the end of series 2 when they knew what series 3 was going to be. This is something that was planned at least 2 years in advance, for at least in someone's mind out there, was actually going, okay, we're going to do an episode 1,000 years in the future. But yeah, it's a good episode. It's probably definitely one of the better ones. The talking of the other episodes in the actual these short treks as well. Yeah. The one that is actually not a bad episode, which is the one with Tilly and the princess. Yeah. The worst thing about that is they utilize that character as a plot point in the episode at the end of series 2. So that would be like a B story. In a normal Trek story, that would be like the B story. Oh my God, Tilly's found someone there hiding on the deck while all the other stuff's going on in the background. Yeah. And because so if you miss that sort of Trek, you go, where the hell did this character come from? So that was a weird choice to do that. And obviously that was what I assumed they were doing with short Treks. This is all the stuff we couldn't fit in the episodes that we just chucked into some stuff. Whereas Calypso is completely separate from that. This is just not just kind of like some B story we just didn't add in. So it's interesting, yeah.
Do you want to talk about short treks as in a longer form, or?
I think it's worth it, but I haven't watched them all, so we have to wait. I have to catch up. But I did watch the Tilly one because I am a card-carrying member of the Ensign Tilly fan club.
I don't like that episode.
It's okay. I mean, I love Tilly, and I think that she's a fantastic character. But
and it's nothing against Tilly. It's nothing against the actor or the characters. It's just nothing has time to breathe, and it's another problem I have with the new Trek. Is it feels like a spot show.
And
like
this is the problem,
in modern day wrestling, the spot show is just like you do all your shit, whether it makes sense or not. And in terms of presenting short treks as this new form of Star Trek told in a new medium, not with act breaks, not with 45 minutes to an hour, but in terms of like a condensed version of Star Trek. I just found the Tilly episode exhausting. I was tired afterwards.
And again, the irony being is we've just talked about Calypso where it had one actor and a voice. Mm-hmm. That episode has effectively two characters in it. Yeah. And it feels like, well, surely other crew members must have seen her. Surely and there should be more characters in those ones. It's that and it does seem like what they teleported on. They did all that. Tilly did all the stuff on the Discovery with no one discovering what was actually figuring out what was going on. But yeah, it was just the thing that bugged me more than anything else was the character became a plot point in the the core episodes. And if you didn't watch that short trek for whatever reason, like I said, but season 2 is of the short treks we haven't got in the UK. So I don't know if anything happened with those at all. I mean, there's a tardigrade episode where he travels through time. That sounds really cool. But
that one's great. That one,
yeah. So it's like, where are they? I don't know where they are. So yeah. So I thought that was a bit of a weird one. So.
Yeah, I was confused in the Tilly episode because of the princess character. Like, okay, so at first she's like some sort of feral cat person, and then she can go invisible, and then now she's talking, and then she's an engineer.
And she's lithium crystals.
And now she's a princess, and I'm like, okay, like make up your mind, man. Like,
choose a thing, choose a hook.
She's a hook.
Don't give me all the hooks in the fish. One hook.
I see Carrie and Bogan has joined us. Welcome, Carrie. Yes, we're back, and we will come back and we will do short treks. I think.
Hello.
We know that we have been talking about doing a sort of catch-up episode, like right before the next season of Discovery launches, just so we can kind of talk about what's been going on up to this point, and maybe any other last-minute Star Trek stuff we want to hit before the season starts. Maybe we'll do short treks then. But we have a show. There is a weekly Star Trek show coming out right now, and it's called Lower Decks. It's animated. It's by it's on CBS as well. It's by the crew that did I can't remember the name of the other animated show.
Rick and Morty.
The guy that did Rick and Morty. I've been watching it. It's fun. I enjoy it. I don't get most of the jokes. because what struck me about the show, and you, Jim, you're gonna unpack this for us. It hasn't gotten to Britain yet, right? So, Aid, you haven't.
No, nothing.
That is a shame. That is a shame.
But it is really celebratory of Star Trek. Like it throws in virtually every line is a callback to some Star Trek episode somewhere, right? Like it's just packed with references. Most of
with so many references, I have to watch it 2 times.
Yeah,
and I watch it with subtitles.
Okay, yeah.
There's so much going on in these episodes, and I don't even think that's the strongest suit of what this show accomplished.
Okay, well, so tell us what you think of Lower Decks, Jim.
All right, so I'm not the target demo for this show. Even though I appreciate, well, in terms of like this style of cartoon animation, storytelling.
Yeah.
I don't care for Rick and Morty because, again, Rick and Morty I feel is too mean-spirited.
Okay.
Like anytime I watch a Rick and Morty episode, I know Rick's going to be an asshole to someone, and it's going to be celebrated, and I just find him pitiable.
It's a really cynical show.
Yeah, and this gives me that sort of like fast-paced, kinetic. I don't want to say ADHD because that sounds like I'm making it a pejorative, but that sort of just faster-paced, referential humor, but with Star Trek's ethos.
Yeah.
And even more than that, the thing I've gravitated to with the show is the thing that I love about the original episode that this show is sort of modeled after, which is the TNG episode Lower Decks, which is in my top 5 favorite Star Trek episodes of all time through all the series. Like Jason, I ran a whole campaign just with the Lower Decks premise because I love it so much.
Yeah.
With that said, the first episode gives us where these young people are struggling with how they relate to the command crew.
Yeah.
And the story is that the command crew doesn't care about the people in the Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Like at least the command crew on this starship, because they give you the out. Mariner is a giant Star Trek fan. Like she loves Enterprise history. Like that's her niche, right? Like, and you find that out at the very end of the episode. Like, so the person who's disparaging the people in charge of them is actually this closeted Star Trek fan, and that comes out at the very end. But in terms of like setting it up, when Captain Freeman, who's the captain of the Cerritos, calls bone meal by a different name, like that's a reference to Where No Man Has Gone Before, where one of Kirk's first actions is he calls Yeoman Smith Yeoman Jones, or vice versa. I don't remember off the top. He calls her by the wrong name, and she corrects him.
That's great.
On the bridge of the Enterprise. So there was precedence for that, or the fact that they make in the episode, they do the whole command crew does the laughing thing from TOS. Well, the people not laughing are the background people, and the people never laughing. If you watch any of the TOS episodes, the background people. So we're getting a show that's exploring what it means to be in an organization that is overlooking the people, the rank and file. And as someone who works in an organization who belongs into a group that is rank and file, the idea that there's a whole episode where people get rid of buffalo time. And buffalo time being a thing that Scotty invented, right? Like that's the classic thing, is you always exaggerate by a factor of 4. Like, I've been in that corporate meeting. I've been in that academic setting where they're like, okay, we're going to make sure that every minute is accounted for. I've had to account for every minute. I have been stressed out and sleep deprived trying to log all my minutes. So when that happened,
you've been on that red clock.
I've been on that red clock. I know exactly what this feels like. And it's not human. Like it takes away the humanity of people in a way that is very insidious. But it sounds good on the corporate spreadsheet. It sounds good in a meeting. Like, we're going to be more efficient. Well, what does that mean? And the fact that we're telling stories that I don't think you would have told, you wouldn't tell the story on the Enterprise. Like, yes, those are the jokes. Like, for instance, the piece of wood from that planet is a reference to an Enterprise episode where Porthos got sick and peed on a tree.
Is it really?
Yeah. You're
shitting me.
No, there was an episode where Ultra, it's called like a night in sick bay. Ultra beams down with Porthos to a planet. He pees on the sacred tree, and he gets sick. So the whole episode is Ultra and Phlox in sick bay for a whole night. And at the very end, he has to dress up in regalia that's not too dissimilar from these crystal folks and do a whole dance in apology.
And she mentions the dance that they have done.
Yeah. So those like these little jokes that those like 2 types of humor in the show. Those the reference humor was like, oh, I had to fight a living tar pit. Well, we know that's all Messi kills, Denise Crosby. And then those are the jokes that it takes you a while for it to land.
Yeah.
When they're talking about something that I tangentially sort of know. I'm like, oh, okay, you're referencing this thing. But it's not just a name drop. Like the name drop jokes, like, haha, that's funny. But the fact that we're going to do a whole episode based on Scotty's, and we all love Scotty.
Yeah.
We're all going to do an episode based on Scotty fucking around with the captain. Like, just genius for me.
Yeah. Another one of our old-time watchers has returned. I can tell that not everyone is such a big fan of Lower Decks, but
mileage may vary. Like, I completely understand. Like, if you watch this show and you're like, this is not for me, it is. I don't think it's designed. I think it's supposed to be the gateway show, because I showed it to my son the first episode, and it was the first time I've ever shown him anything Star Trek where he doesn't tell me before, after, and during I hate Star Trek. Because he's a normal kid. Like, nothing I can do about that.
I think the trick here is that I think many people see Lower Decks as being somehow mean or critical of Star Trek, that it's making fun of Star Trek. I don't see it that way at all. I didn't think I would like it. I'm not a Rick and Morty fan. I don't watch adult animated shows. I didn't think I would like it. But it's not being critical. It's not making fun of Star Trek. It might be making fun of Kirk, and the other. But
Kirk can have the piss taken out of him. It's definitely making fun of Riker.
They kind of deserve it, right? Like, I don't think making fun of Riker is all that bad. I mean, the number of times in the last episode, though, where we see the first officer like putting his foot on a stump or something and like doing the Riker lean or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. That when they're both doing, like, when the 2 characters, both the first officer and what's her name, Mariner, they're both putting their foot up on the stump and they're both leaning into each other, like that. That's hilarious. So anyway,
there's also a TNG episode where Riker does it, and then Geordi walks over and does it on the same rock.
I've seen
it. They have a conversation.
I've seen the meme. Yes. So. it is making fun of that aspect of it, but I think there's a lot of love for Trek in this show. I mean, let's be honest. Every one of those 4 main characters loves the Federation. They all have different ideas of what the Federation is. They all love they love Star Trek, right? And whether you're the Orion rookie who's brand new on the ship and is just like, oh wow, everything's so amazing, or whether you're the engineering guy who's like super into all the technical details, like I memorized the entire Star Trek technical manual from scratch and I know exactly where the bathroom is on the bridge and all of that shit, right? Or your Beutler who is like the regulation guy, right? And the straight arrow of this show, the Cyclops of the show, if you will. And then there's Mariner, who is the original series character, right? She's like, I want to break all the rules, and I'm going to wear my shirt sleeves rolled up, and I'm going to, punch and kick. And when the characters do like the running, jump, Kirk kick, I bust out laughing. I just think that's hilarious.
For me, the funnest joke in the whole show was in the most recent episode when Boromir is actually singing the theme to Next Generation before the captain shows up. Yeah. In an episode of Consciousness of the King, they have a jazz riff of the original TOS theme.
Oh yeah,
there's a jazz riff that's playing at the party scene. Like so Star Trek is referencing that their theme songs are actually in continuity.
And anyway, so my point was just that I think that the characters on the show and the people making the show really do love Star Trek. And they poke a little fun at some of our favorite bits, but we can take a joke. We're grown-ups. And I love the little bit. I mean, let's take it for what it is. I don't consider anything in the show to be canon. I know, you said that they're establishing they're making this stuff canon, but I don't think the Cerritos is going to get name dropped on Picard.
Well, that's the nice thing about the show is they put a giant red lantern on the show, right? Like they put a giant red lantern to say that this ship is not the Enterprise. This is a walking blue collar ship with a blue collar crew, and they're not the Federation. They're not Starfleet's finest, and that way, whatever they're poking fun at, you can easily sit there and say that's not canon.
Right.
But if we are watching like a Picard episode and may reference something that this doctor comes up with, like some sort of medical cure that she came up with, I can easily see them doing a name drop reference like that.
Okay.
But maybe not the Cerritos itself, because it just sounds like, I grew up in Southern California, so every time I think of Cerritos, I think of Cerritos Auto Center.
Exactly. Yeah.
Commercials.
Yeah.
So like Auto Center always pops in my head like as soon as it's name dropped. Like I don't think it's intentional.
Yeah.
And honestly, Star Trek tends to not show, with the exception of like Miles O'Brien and maybe Trip Tucker and Enterprise.
Yeah.
Star Trek doesn't show blue collar people.
Right.
Like blue collar people love Star Trek. There's a lot to like about it, but they're not represented as the core group. And I think the fact that we have a show now where the most important person in the Federation is Miles O'Brien.
Yeah.
Quintessential blue collar worker of Star Trek. I think that's very telling because of who we're trying to reach.
There's this kind of if I could put on my literary critic hat for a minute, there's a long argument that goes that the history of literature is essentially a move from romance towards realism. Now, there's a lot of bullshit in this argument, but follow me for a minute. And when I say romance, I don't mean kiss romance. I mean the sense of the fantastic story, like the Iliad or the Odyssey, to bring this back to Calypso that we touched on earlier, in which some protagonist, who's usually a person of royalty, a wealthy person of royalty with power, is the protagonist of the story. And they go through these fantastic magical adventures. But compared to the present, where we like our protagonists to be more realistic. We like them to be ordinary people or working class characters, like blue collar characters, as you call them. The famous criticism is I can't understand Hamlet because I don't know anybody who's a prince, right? Like I can't get into it because I don't see myself as anybody in this story. Okay. Well, Star Trek is a classic example of that. I mean, all the characters in it are like these elite, best of the best in what they do. Now, there was a lot of American in this show too, in the sense that a lot of these people seemed to be pretty ordinary, who had gone to school, and they had gotten these positions not because they were born into them, but because they had earned them, right? Kirk is the youngest captain in Starfleet. That's not because he was born into the job. It's because, at least in the original series, it's because he was really good.
Yeah, it's a meritocracy.
It's a meritocracy. Thank you. Yes, exactly. But most of us can still have a hard time identifying with that, especially when imposter syndrome kicks in. And instead, we identify with the underdog. America loves the underdog. That's the story we want. We don't want to tell the story about the people that are in charge. We make fun of those people. We want to tell the story about the people that are underneath, that do all the hard work that then the upper jobs people take credit for. That's the American story. And as Alfred Hitchcock wisely understood, Americans will root for anybody if that person can shown to be good at their job, right? It doesn't matter how evil, cruel, or wicked that person is, or how high or low in social class. If they're really good at what they do, America will love them, right? And that's what we have at Lower Decks. These people are, they're the other guys, right? They're the losers, but they're really good at what they do. And I have, the show has won me over. The show has won me over. Aid, you have to watch it.
Yeah, I was just saying, my biggest problem with this,
yeah, good,
okay, is right. I didn't want a Star Trek comedy.
Yeah.
When they announced an animated series, I was hoping animated series Mark II. We're going to see a infinite budget of Star Trek. We can do whatever we need to do. So we can. I mean, not be funny. It's very rare nowadays you get those kind of adventure shows you got in the 80s. So Thundercats, He-Man, Johnny Quest, all that kind of stuff. I think a Star Trek that did that, I would be very, very happy with. It didn't have to be, not necessarily aiming for an adult audience, but at least an adventure show, a show where you can do these life lessons that we see in the core TV series, but maybe aimed at a slightly lower demographic. Yeah. And that's my biggest disappointment with it. Because again, when they announced it, it's like, hey, we're doing a comedy show, and it's drawn just like Rick and Morty. It's like, yeah, well, I've already got Rick and Morty. Why do I need another show like that? So that was the thing I was kind of disappointed with. To say, I've not seen the episode yet, so I can't say if I like it or not. But as for you saying about Rick and Morty being very mean-spirited, I quite like that because that's me in a nutshell. Very cynical and mean-spirited. So that's perfectly good. So so this, it may grow on me once it actually, if it ever arrives over here. But I say, my biggest disappointment was I just really would have loved to have seen that adventure show out there.
Now, the nice thing is, Aid, Nickelodeon and CBS are working together to create something called Star Trek Prodigy, which is exactly that show.
Right.
It's Star Trek for a younger audience doing an eventual serial where I think the premise I read was they steal a TOS ship and they'll set in Next Generation and they go off and they have Trek adventures.
Right. Interesting.
Like a whole bunch of kids doing that. And I think you may be getting what you want. It's just this isn't that show yet.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I think we've got we're in an era now where they are doing this kind of scattergun approach. They're trying to try different things. I mean, everything, DC Comics, Marvel, anything. We'll just try anything. Whatever hits the wall stays there. That's what we'll focus on. And I think this is one of those things. So.
It's kind of the golden age of Star Trek. I mean, we're at least entering it. We haven't gotten. Jim is trying to decide if it's as good as that moment when Next Gen Virgin,
like you can see all the math showing up on your head.
I could see the equations floating above your head in white.
Here's the difference between the two agents.
Okay.
And it's not being quantified in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
The difference is with the Borman era Trek, when Borman era was Warp 10 and they were kicking ass.
Yeah.
All the shows were pretty much the same in terms of the production quality and the story they were telling.
Yeah.
Discovery is different from Picard, which is different from Lower Decks, which is different from the short treks.
Yeah.
Which most of them serve as Discovery.
Yeah.
but some of them Silvis Bacon, like the last one is season 2, Silvis Bacon, and 2 of them are just animated adventures. Like so the difference is that these shows are talking about Trek, but they're talking at it from different. Like Discovery is the action adventure show. That's the phase of the pew pew. Everything's gonna destroy and be ruined unless we do the right thing at the right moment, right? And because the slower, contemplative, what is the meaning of man show? What are these big topic issues? And Lower Decks is the blue collar. We hate our bosses. You hate our bosses. Let's make fun of our bosses together. Kind of show.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Prodigy is going to be, or Section 31, or any of these other projects going to be like, because so far they've all been drastically different. Nothing has really been photocopied.
Yeah,
and I think because we saw at the end of Borman, everyone was tired with the same photocopy, but by the time Enterprise ends.
Sorry. Yeah, I say a lot of people, obviously, the critical thing about that they don't like about Picard and Discovery is because they are not in the same format as Next Generation. They are different, but I see it as it's almost like it's the role playing analogy, right? We're doing a Star Trek game. What's the setting? What are we doing? Are we doing a Klingon game? Are we doing a Starfleet a Spec Ops game? Are we doing an actual fleet based game? Whatever. So it's very similar to that. I think the idea you can't tell stories within the Star Trek universe that are vastly different, I think is crazy. You cannot stick to that same format as every single time. That being said, I think we will be on the pinnacle of a golden age if we do get a weekly crew based show of a new or a new Enterprise or a new something. That would be the kind of like the pinnacle of like, oh my god, and people actually like it, of course. That would be the fundamental thing. A show that actually goes, oh my god, this is just like Next Generation, but it's XYZ different. And I don't know if that will ever happen, because obviously with all the streaming services and stuff like that, I don't honestly know if that will actually ever happen again.
The closest you'll probably get will be Strange New Worlds, which will actually be the Enterprise, but it will be the pre-Kirk Enterprise, right?
And fingers crossed that is good, because again, Anson Mount as Pike is just fantastic.
I can't say enough good things about that.
Yeah.
And everything suggests that show is also going to be more episodic. I mean, there will still be an overplot, but it will basically be more self-contained. And people can watch one episode at a time and get a whole story.
And I hope they do that, because I like that. I like the idea of having a story from A to B at the end of it, and you figure out the thing, and then there might be the threads that tie through. I mean, even going back through Next Generation episodes where going back for the early stuff where you see the first introduction of the Borg and the reports of the Romulans. Looking back at it, you go, oh my god, okay, that happened in an episode. When you were reviewing it, you probably never even paid much attention to it. It wasn't like, obviously that's what happened. So I'm hoping they do something like that. But then again, it's a interesting era to pick. There's no reason why we can't have another series based around the Kirk era. Yeah. With a previous captain. And again, when Pike was introduced, and then obviously Kirk came along, no one would have thought, we'll go, don't worry, 40, 50 years time or whatever, we'll go back to Pike at some. No one would have ever expected that to happen. So it's really cool.
Star Trek is a spectrum, and people have their own idea of what Star Trek is. And as you were suggesting, Jim, like in the Berman era, that spectrum was a lot tighter. Like people were making a bunch of shows that were all more or less the same, and it was the same uniforms, it was the same sets, and it was also more self-referential. You could
the same boots, like Garrett Wong is rocking around as Ensign Kim wearing Brent Spinel's boots. Like
when Will Riker, when Thomas Riker shows up on DS9 pretending to be Will Riker, you can do that episode because everything is crossing over, right? Mm-hmm. But now the idea seems to be, well, rather than trying to find the sweet spot in which everybody's version of Star Trek converges like a Venn diagram, we'll try to find that one tiny sliver that hits everybody's version of Star Trek. Instead, we're going to maybe give the creators the reins a little bit, and we're going to let them come up with their own version. Of course, it still has to go through a million meetings, still has to get approval, right? But because even the cheapest Star Trek show is a very expensive production, so none of this stuff gets done on a whim. But they're trying to hit different parts of the spectrum, and quite frankly, I don't think they're trying to get the same audience for every show. I mean, they would love it if that happened. But I think, like you suggested, Jim, that Lower Decks is kind of aimed at a particular kind of person. Well, it's aimed at a couple of different kinds of people, right? Some of those people are old times Trek nerds like you, and part not quite as extreme as me, who get the jokes, right? Who get all the name drop references and like, oh, like that's that's Picard's Jeep that he's driving around in Star Trek. You know,
that was the one thing I texted you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And
I was so excited when I saw the Jeep. I'm like, oh, there's actually a reason for it. It's moving equipment. I'm so happy. And you're like, what Jeep?
Yeah, I didn't know, but then I remembered because of the show, because we watched it together. But then the other audience is the audience that watches watches comedy animation in half-an-hour bits, and that's their favorite kind of television. And if it can lure them into liking Star Trek, because a lot of those people are like, well, I don't really like Star Trek. Well, maybe you do. Maybe you do.
If there is some kind of consistency, and obviously, with all the stuff that's gone on with the movies and the amalgamation of the two companies, there is no reason why we couldn't have kind of like back to the old era of Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, kind of running the same. I mean, like the CW shows for the DC universe.
Yeah,
there is no reason we couldn't have 3 different shows that do different stuff, but they may crossover episodes. If CBS were confident enough that it would be worth their while to do it, there is no reason that couldn't happen. I mean, there's no reason, technically speaking, why Discovery couldn't show up in Picard, because they're time traveling. They've done that already. So, I mean, there's no reason if they do come back, they just end up 100 years later on or something. It's just, who knows? But, I mean, it would be nice to think, but.
Oh, Picard's now in an android body. There's no reason to say he doesn't survive 1,000 years. Whatever it is, Discovery and Bowman have shown up.
But, I mean, those CW shows, obviously with Arrowverse as the key one. I mean, crikey, they cranked a load of those out, and most of them hang around for quite some time. So I mean, it's a possibility they could do something like that. But it's like we were saying. They had the big meeting about the future of Star Trek. They have to be confident enough to actually do something with it. I think just the idea is like just sitting on it as a brand and just hoping that people remember it. 10, 15 years at a time without actually putting any stuff out is not good enough anymore. We have to keep pushing stuff. Yeah.
We're going to let it go with that. Age, you're going to have the last word. Thanks to everybody for coming to our Space Force Supplemental. And thank you both, Jim and Abe, for coming. This is sort of a short notice, but I was like jonesing for some Star Trek. And I
missed you guys. I woke up, I now have 3 puppies. So my life is around the dogs. And I told my wife, I've got to record this podcast. I'm like, I don't remember how to do a podcast. I'm so out of practice because, we're stuck in John Oliver's joke of the time soup with this quarantining and like it feels like, on one hand, it feels like I haven't seen you guys in ages. And the other hand, it feels like I just saw you like 5 minutes ago. And then back into the rhythm of me over-talking Abe.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. We'll see you soon. We will be back right before the 3rd season of Discovery with a recap and also speculating on what we are hoping to see in the season to come. What do we want Discovery to do in its time-traveled 3rd season now that it has gone to the far future? What do we think of the trailer? What do we think of the previews that we have seen? What do we want to get? And then we can come back at the end and find out whether we got what we wanted or not. All right. Live long and prosper, everybody.
Bye.